Hello, my name is Brad Dixon, and I'm the head football, head track, and head strength coach at Camp Point Central High School here in Illinois. And I want to first start off by just thanking Coach Tony Holler, Coach Chris Corfist for inviting me to speak at this year's virtual track football consortium. Tonight, I am going to discuss the 10 things football coaches get wrong and how to fix it. I'm going to be honest. I am probably the least qualified person out of this entire lineup. I do not have an extensive fancy background. I have not coached Olympians. I have not won any state championships. I'm just a coach that has been in the game for 17, 18 years. I've coached a multitude of sports. I've done tons and tons of things wrong throughout my career. And really, if I'm guilty of anything, is that I have surrounded myself around and reached out to some extremely talented and smart coaches, many of them speaking at this TFC or in previous TFCs. And I've really stolen a lot of ideas from all these people, and I've kind of created this football program, what we have, Coach Holler and I have really coined as sprint-based football. Which really takes a look at football from a different lens. But it's through a lot of failures that I've had throughout my career that's really helped us to build this successful program that we built here in Illinois. Camp Point Central is a small rural school here in Illinois, only about 240 kids year in and year out. We average around 50 players on our football team. For the first 50 years or so of the program, really until 2008, Camp Point Central had made it to one playoff, and their best record of all time was 6-3. Since 2008, we've made 12 straight playoff appearances, and since 2010, we've been in the top 10 in wins in small school football in Illinois. Several quarterfinal appearances, a couple semifinal appearances, and we played for the state championship in 2018 and finished runners-up. So, we've been able to take a lot of these ideas that I'm going to share with you throughout this presentation and put them to use. So, if you're a football coach who is, either gotten stagnant like I had, looking for an edge, looking for some new ideas, I think you're in the right place. And the things I'm going to talk about, some of it's going to be controversial. I may seem like I'm an adversary in this, but I want to be honest here. This is a reflection piece for me. These are pretty much all of the things that I've gotten wrong throughout my 18 years of coaching that I've really, I wouldn't say I stumbled upon, but have been brought to my attention either through, like I said, various coaching contacts, things that we've seen throughout a program, how it's evolved. So I have done all of these things wrong. So I am football coaches. I'm not just talking to you. I'm reflecting on my own career here. But hopefully, through all of this, there will be some things that will challenge you. I know there'll be some things that'll piss you off. And that's good because when you're pissed off, it's kind of a challenge. Like, you're going to set out to prove me wrong. And I've been proven wrong time and time again, and I'll be proven wrong again. But, my goal here is to challenge the way that you think. And maybe give you that edge that you need to improve your program. So the 10 things that I'm going to look at is this idea that too many coaches focus on the muscular before the neurological part, that we try too hard to be very sophisticated and complex, that most of us are guilty of a super long warm-up or the practice grind. We as coaches, we love this idea of conditioning. Most football coaches do no max velocity speed work. Most of us have weekend practices or very long coaches meetings on Saturday and Sunday. We do a poor job generally of substitution. We like this idea of Ironman football. We emphasize toughness. We think the tough teams win. And then we're one of the few sports that believes in this idea of punitive physical punishment when kids do not meet the standards that we have set for them. So this is kind of the ride I'm going to take you on over the next hour, hour and a half of kind of diving into these different ideas and sharing with you some of the things that I've learned. So let's go. What is muscular before neurological? I would say that most of us, Neanderthal, meathead football coaches know a lot about muscles. We're in the business of building muscle and building armor and giving our kids, the best chance to be successful through great lifting programs and in an off-season strength conditioning. And I was that coach. I was I've ran strength conditioning in the summers for 18 years, and over the last 5 years, I think I've been able to transition into athletic PE, and so I understand this idea of build muscles. Where I failed miserably was to understand where it all starts. And it all starts with the brain, or this idea of neurology. The brain determines everything. I mean, it guides you, obviously. If you think about it in terms of a cadaver has muscles. But why doesn't it move? Well, there's no electricity. The brain no longer works. And so I just want to talk to you a little bit of this idea of some things that you can do from a neurological standpoint that can really help you improve your athletic performance and or your injury prevention. And one of the quotes that really stood out to me in the beginning was this idea that the central nervous system controls muscle function and the muscles control joints. Whenever any one of these systems are faulty, dysfunction, injury, or disease will follow. Think about as you age, think about if you're a middle-aged guy like myself or even a little bit older, and you think back to, I've got a bad back, I've got a bad hip, my knees are bad, I've got all these things. And a lot of that goes back to some previous maybe injuries that we had. It goes back to old age, but it really goes back to the central nervous system because that's what controls muscle function. And the central nervous system really has one job, and that is to keep us alive. It doesn't care about our athletic performance. It defaults to what will make us the safest. And when injuries occur, and we play, the sport of football, for example, it's violent. And our brain does a good job of turning things on and shutting things off in order to keep us alive. And so a good challenge is to manipulate the input that we get through that neurological system in order to try to reverse some of the effects of that kind of fight or flight or survival mode that we all kind of live in. And the best way to do that is through something called reflexive performance reset. This was brought to my attention 4 or 5 years ago by an assistant coach that I had. Then I myself went on and became certified in levels 1, 2, and 3 of RPR. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what those are. The guy on the left, his name is Douglas Heel. And the guy in the far right in the individual pictures are Dan Fichter. They are key cogs in this idea of RPR. Douglas Heel had brought something to the world called Be Activated, using some techniques that have been around for a long, long time. And he was a practitioner-based activation in getting this neurological system to work and to thrive so that your muscles thrived as a result. And Dan Fichter, I think a lot of people call him the international man of mystery, was always looking for that edge and really got into trying to figure out ways to improve human performance. And so he had flown to London to listen to Douglas speak. And he immediately called Chris Korfist, and Chris Korfist is this gentleman here in the middle, and told him, we need to bring this guy to America. Because Chris, and most of you probably know that story, Chris had a sprinter that had pulled his hamstring, and there was nothing that he could do to get him back to where he was before. Didn't matter how many muscle strengthening exercises and things that he had done. And so they bring Douglas in, and he teaches him this idea of Be Activated, and it was very practitioner-based. And so when Chris shared this with Cal Dietz here on the right side of this picture, and then with J.L. Holdsworth on the left side, they came up with this idea of creating a system that could be shared out to the masses, that didn't have to be practitioner-based, that could be done individually. It could be taught by coaches, and that players could do it to themselves. And that was kind of where RPR was born. So what is it? It's a system of daily self-care techniques that allow you to instantly feel better, move better, and live a better life. The key difference with RPR that is so much different than anything else is that you can do it to yourself. You know, most other things, chiropractors, doctor, things like that, people are doing things to you. This is something that you can take care of yourself. And I think that is the key value, is in a team of 50 people, 100 players, that your players are doing this to themselves. What exactly are they doing? Well, when we look at this paradigm shift between this idea of mechanical or muscular, most of us look at the glute, and we think that the glute is what extends the hip, which it does. But the muscle itself doesn't actually create the movement. You know, so we can do all the glute bridges, we can do all the clamshells, we can do all of the squats and things that we want to improve our glutes. If the nervous system is not connecting those glutes, and the brain and the glutes are not connected in that pattern, is not in the right, you know, you're not in the right pattern, then it doesn't matter how strong that glute is, it's not going to fire optimally like you want it to. And so to look at things from a neurological lens, is that the nervous system, the brain, is what's going to initiate that movement. And it's a global issue, not just a glute issue. It's actually going to originate with the brain and the central nervous system. So an example of that would be this idea of glute and hip extension. Okay, so I'm not going to show you this video because there's an RPR course and there's an online course. I just want to kind of give you just a quick example of what we're talking about. So a quick test that you could do on an athlete is you could have the athlete lay down. And some of you have maybe done this glute test before. You have them lay down, they bring their foot up, bend their knee to about 90 degrees. You're going to hold the ankle in place, and you're going to see how high they can lift their leg off the ground, how far they can extend their hip using their glute. And then you're going to push down. If the leg doesn't move, the glute is working the way that it's supposed to, and that athlete is locked in correctly. If the leg drops straight down, then that athlete is probably using their hamstring as their base of stability. If the opposite shoulder rolls as you go down, then they're probably using the opposite QL as their base of stability. And if they can't maintain position, then they probably have other neurological issues, and you need to go back to this idea of belly breathing, which is at the beginning of everything. And so through using this test, you can see whether the athlete is using the glute correctly and is in that proper hip extension pattern. You know, most of us, you know, if we're a little bit older, you hear all these back injuries and, you know, my lower back this and that and whatever. Well, a lot of us have probably developed this idea of compensation by using this, the QL, because the body is going to find whatever it feels the safest. And for a lot of us, that is not optimally. And so this idea of RPR is to put the body in this optimal position. You know, we want the body to work optimally. And you know, for a lot more detail, I don't have a lot of time to go in detail on this idea of RPR. You can go to their website, you can take their online course, and you can learn a ton about neurology and how to put your athletes in a better position from an athletic performance standpoint, but also from an injury performance standpoint, and really a lifelong, you know, successful standpoint. And so just a few of the results of RPR since we've went all in on it over the last couple of years is that we've had no soft tissue injuries in 2 seasons. So we haven't had an ACL, we haven't had an Achilles, we haven't had a hamstring pull, we haven't had any of those things that had plagued us in years past. I think in 2015 we had 4 to 5 season-ending injuries. In 2016 we had 3 to 4. And as you know, injuries get you beat. And we've had a few things that happen in a collision sport. We've had a couple broken hands. We had a growth plate fracture, but very limited from an injury perspective. We've had not one varsity concussion in the last 2 seasons, We've had one fresh soft concussion diagnosed in the last 2 seasons. And we average, like many of us did for, concussions were the top, point of emphasis in football. But, we used to average 6 to 10 of those per year, and we haven't had one at the varsity level. So from a varsity perspective, we've essentially been able to address our entire roster for about every game over the last 2 years. And it was pretty awesome to be able to address our entire roster for the 2018 state championship game and have not one varsity player miss a single game in a 14-game season, really a 16-week football season when you count those previous 2 weeks. So I highly, highly recommend you log into that RPR, reflexiveperformance.com, and you dig further into this idea of RPR. Sophisticated complexity. We're all very competitive people. Most of us have this saying of keep it simple, stupid, or KISS, right? And you go back to the old days, right, of, wishbone, I formation, the single wing offense, double tight, 1 or 2 runs, 1 play action pass, things like that. But as the game's evolved, obviously, we've evolved as coaches, and coaches are always looking for that edge. And so, like I said, we all have to kind of decide, who are we as a coach? Are we a West Coast guy? Are we into air raid? Are we into these RPOs? The new surface to air system. What is our system? And are we going to have, call sheets and that have multiple layers, and are we going to create boards? And, we see all these things on TV. We probably grew up in the days, some of us, if you're in your 30s, you grew up in the days of playing Madden and things like that. And, there's so many plays and so many things that look great. And as coaches, we want those things for our program. We want to give our kids the best chance to be successful. And sometimes that leads us to be very, very complex in what we're doing because we're trying to do too much. Because, like I said, we have egos. We all do. We all believe that what we're doing is right. We love to compete. That's why we got into coaching. Most of us got into coaching because we really weren't ready to be done playing. And so the reality is, as a coach, much like as a player, when I wanted to beat that guy across from me, I want to beat that coach across from me. I want to out-scheme my opponents. I want to be the reason that we win. And I don't want to be the reason that we lose. And then we try to take ownership of all of that. And there's nothing wrong with that to an extent. But we forget the key part here is that it doesn't matter how much you know as a coach. It matters what the kids know and what they can execute. Our kids don't watch a ton of football like maybe you or I did. And so when you're talking RPOs and counter bubble and second level defender and third level reads and all these different things, it may make complete sense to you, but it may not to the player that you have on the field. And the things that you draw up on paper against the defense that you're going to go against, it may look awesome, but your players may not be able to execute it. All right. And if your players are thinking and they're using that cerebral part of their brain, they're going to play slow. When they have to think through all of these different reads and all these different things, they're going to play very slow. But if they're using what Coach Holler calls that reptilian brain, and they have simple concepts and simple reads, they're going to play very instinctual and they're going to play fast, right? When they know where they're going and they know what they're supposed to do, they're going to play extremely fast. And with these days of sideline replay and all of these different things, we have to be very, very careful about how much we're giving our players and how complex we want to be and how many plays that we really want to have into our system. So I think a key quote that really stuck with me from Sean McVay from the Super Bowl, when you get that 2 weeks to prepare, he said, you have so much time that you can over-prepare and get away from some of the things that helped you get there. I think sometimes when we as the season progresses, we want to add and we want to adjust so that, I think we just have this fear that teams are going to pick up on what we're doing. Well, the reality is you are who you are, and your players are who they are. And when push comes to shove, your players are going to make plays. And, I think sometimes we're so fearful of that the coach is going to have an answer for what we're doing that we try to do too many things. And in this game, I think when Coach McVay talked about how he had watched 18 different games and he was watching things back in week 3, and it's like, week 3, it's week 19. I mean, things have changed a lot since then, and he really overthought everything. And they only scored 3 points in that game and only had 260 yards of total offense. And throughout the season, they were ranked number 2 in both of those categories. So some things that can help us out. How can we fix this idea that things look good to us on paper, that we want to out-scheme our opponents? And one of those is from the book Essentialism. To be an essentialist, you are constantly defining where you can create the most value, then finding ways to execute it. You've got to figure out what is essential to winning. And Greg McKeown calls it the disciplined pursuit of less. It's not that you're lazy. And I think as coaches, we're so scared that we're going to be underprepared or that someone's going to think we're doing too little that we want to do so much more. And so we want to have 100 checks in. We want to have all these different things in. And the reality is when we get to the game, we're not using, 80% of what we have in. And so we look a lot more like that diagram on the left. We're going in all these different directions. And each week's a different scheme. Each week's a different, we're adding and adding and adding. And a lot of times we never take anything away. And so under this idea of essentialism, we're going to find what those things are that help us the most. And we're going to go full speed in that direction. And another way to think of it is something called the Pareto principle. And this idea is that 80% of our results come from 20% of our effort. So we do lots of things. But the reality is only about 20% of what we do equates to those 80% results. That other 80% of stuff really doesn't help us. And so as a coach, we really have to figure out what our 20% is. From an offensive perspective, what are we going to be known for? So I had an offensive coordinator go through and figure out what our 20% from an offensive perspective was on the year. And so he did. And so we went through these plays. And obviously, we know over 14 years of being together what works and doesn't work. And we're a wing T team. And so some of us would call us old school. But we had 39 different play calls, shot plays, things like that. And out of that 39 is 20% of that is about 8 play calls. And our top 8 play calls equated to 77% of our total yardage. And if you looked at our practice schedule, we spent the majority of our time, and you look at what we installed and what we consistently worked on throughout the year, this is what it was. And like I said, when push came to shove, this is where we were going to go. This was where our money was. These are what we were putting our chips on because we knew that's what made us the most successful. In fact, that outside belly play at the top has averaged over 10 yards a carry over the last 10, 11 years that we've ran it. And so I would caution you to ask, whenever you're installing something new, you've got to ask, what does it cost? What is it going to cost you in practice time? What is it going to cost you in effort, repetition, and things like that? And is the cost worth it? Is it showing up on the field? And with huddle these days and all of this, and if you're a college coach, you have people that can do a lot of this stuff, you can figure out what you're running in the game. And if what you're doing in practice is not, if you've ran this play 20 times and it's netting you 1.5 yards each time you run it, then that needs to go. That's part of that 80% that's not helping you win. So figure out what that 20% is. Go back to last year. Go into huddle and go into that average play and figure out how many times you ran those plays and which ones actually helped you. Same thing defensively. How many coverages do you have? How many blitzes do you have? What blitzes are actually getting home? What coverages are actually the most successful? and take a look at your program and figure out where that 20% is, and then cut out a lot of that other stuff. And this idea will help you moving forward to some of the other things that I'm going to talk about in terms of practice organization. So when practice starts, this idea of warm-up, I think it's been ingrained to us for a long time, and football coaches are probably have been the last group to kind of ditch this static stretching warm-up that we do, this long, drawn-out, count, do jumping jacks of our, our opponent's name or our name or things like that. And I just think we are living in this idea of this is what we've always done in the past. And we did this long warm up, and I can honestly say we did it because that is what we've always done. And I know none of us want to utter those words, but the reality is most of us are doing what we're doing because that is what we've always done. And so the typical football warm up for practice could start with film. It probably starts with taping for a lot of people. They may go out and do pre-practice fundamentals, then get in their stretching lines or flexibility time. They may do a dynamic part of that. And then for a long time, we would go into some agility stations. We would set up different stations around, and guys would run through bags. They would go around cones and do lots of those things, and that would be what we call our warm-up. Pre-game, much the same. Probably have a meal somewhere in there. If you're on the road, you may have it on the way. You may have it before you leave. If it's a home game, you may feed them. Some of you may feed them the night before. You usually probably have some type of team meeting, motivational time. Maybe you show them clips of the game before, highlights, things like that. You have a taping time. You have specials, stretching, and then you go out and do individual drills. And some of this, some of our pre-practices take 30 minutes. Some of our pre-games, hour 15. Your specials may go out an hour 15 before the game. And it's just crazy. And I like to simply say, stop. Just stop getting your guys tired in warm-ups. You shouldn't look down at the other end and just see players taking their helmet off and they're just pouring sweat. And the steam is just coming off, and the guys, especially your linemen, they're just hoping to survive this warm up. And I think too many of us do that. You think back to when we used to play in the backyard. We would just grab a football and we would pick teams and we'd start playing. But then when we get into coaching, we decide, okay, we need to do all of these things before we start either playing or we start practice. What can you do? Well, and this is something I got from really RPR and Coach Holler, called a wake up. So I think when you use the term warm up, it's like this long, slow, gradual, progression into playing. When you think wake up, we're thinking, something high intense, get the central nervous system woken up. And let's get going here. And it's not some long drawn out thing. And when you say a warm up, I think it gives your players this feeling like, we can be lazy or maybe we don't have to take it serious. I know we did a lot of the static stretching. So as coaches, we could talk to our players before the game, shake their hands. And we just cut it out. And I'll be honest, some of our players and some of our fans and their dads, they didn't like it because they wanted us out there way before the game. So we do this wake up. We may, depending on where we're at in the year, we may have film pre-practice, especially in the early parts of the season when we're in heavy install mode. And then we'll do RPR. We do that as a group, and our captains lead it. And then we do speed drills. So we do specific things that help us in building our max velocity speed, which I'll talk about as we go. And then depending on where we're at, we may start with some max velocity sprints. A lot of times I have all those kids in my PE class, and we'll have already sprinted throughout the day in athletic PE. But it's definitely something that you can start practice with to really prime that central nervous system. And this takes us less than 10 minutes, and then we get right into practice. Pre-game, we do something called a freestyle warm-up. So when our players arrive, if they're a varsity player and they have a purpose, not just a young kid that wants to go out and try to play, 2-on-2, we let our guys go out with some guidance on getting their, and I know I said warm up there, but getting their body in the right frame of mind. And this is that time where we let our players kind of have some autonomy for what they want to do. So our kickers, we don't give them a specific, kicks they need to do. Our snappers, our quarterbacks, our wide receivers, they understand what helps us win. They understand the things that we're going to need for the game that we're playing. And they go out, they put their headphones on, and they get their brain, their body into the right frame of mind to get prepared without coaches out there leading them through this super long warm-up. We tape only if necessary. It's crazy, and I finally put a stop to it, that and we had all these guys that would want to get taped for game day, but they would never get taped for practice. And so, 4 out of 5 times a week, we're not getting taped, but then on the 5th time, we're getting taped. And so we only get taped if necessary. Otherwise, we stay inside. We do RPR inside, and we do our speed drills inside. And we don't take the field until there's about, somewhere between 16 and 20 minutes on the clock, usually around that 16-minute mark. We have a short indie period, some position-specific movements, and then we go through a real short team period, and then we're ready to kick off. And our ultimate goal is to save energy and adrenaline for kickoff. To go out there an hour before game, scream and yell and hoot and holler and jump around and do all that stuff does nothing but waste energy. It's not intimidating. In fact, as an opposing coach, that is my hope. I hope that you go out on the field an hour before the game. I hope you hoop and holler, do static stretching, get your team tired, because I know when the kickoff goes, we're going to have tons more energy than you as the game goes on, because you've used up a ton of yours in that first initial warm-up. And so if you want some more information on this, again, Dan Fichter, the International Man of Mystery, has some webinars out there on his neuro warm-up, which has a lot of other really cool things that we're looking to add into to really getting your body into that performance mode, and trying to maximize the week of practice that you put in and put the best product out on the field. When we take the field, like I said, this is what it looks like. We have the freestyle warm-up. I always say like relay handoffs. Guys go and do their relay handoffs like we've always, they know what they're doing. The coaches aren't over there unless they have an issue. We go through all of this, and like I said, we take the field with about 16, 18 minutes to go, and then we kick off. So that's what it looks like. Now, that's not what you have to do, but that's what it looks like for us. And then at halftime, this is another key thing, right? That's a break in the action. It's a time to recover, to play in the second half. We get them off their feet. If it's cold, we get them in somewhere warm, and then we get them some type of food and drink. We can RPR again if necessary for certain guys, and then we do not line up in a circle. I guess that's not lining up, getting in a circle and static stretch. We would never want to get warmed up, get woken up in the first half, and then come back and do static stretching. The same thing, our kids will look at our opponents and say, Coach, look, they're static stretching. We go out and we do our speed drills, and that could be, we call them hamstring kicks, dribbles, we do box jumps, we do bounding, things like that, springy central nervous system primers in our speed drills. So here's a picture of what it looks like. It's kind of a picture in a picture. The top part is what our halftime looks like with Gatorades, and we give ownership to the players. the players get their choice, and we tell the younger kids that aren't getting in the game, hey, you're not grabbing this food. This isn't for you. They get a choice, whether they want a chocolate bar, granola bar, banana, apple, small Gatorade, water, whatever's going to help them. And the kids, you give them that ownership, they'll figure out what actually helps them be successful. But then the other bigger picture is all of our guys in a square doing team RPR. We're going through our wake-up drills, which, again, give you a lot more detail on that if you take the RPR course, belly breathing and wake-up drills. And we're doing this inside. We got to do it wherever we can. So we're playing at a college, and they have their volleyball nets set up. So we're doing that, and our captains are leading that. And so we don't take the field ever until there's about 16 to 18 minutes to go. And our opponents, especially if it's the playoffs and we're playing someone new, they're always trying to figure out where we're at. Grind. I think football coaches, myself included, we have this cult of, this idea of the grind. Football is a grind, and everything that we do is all about hard work. And I don't want to make fun of hard work. Hard work is extremely important, but we have to be smart. And so I've got a lot of stuff in this presentation. I've got a lot of stuff out there about practice and how to set up a sprint-based practice. And so I'm going to give you some, but there's a lot more resources out there. And obviously at the end will be my contact information as you have questions, because a lot of this is going to challenge, the things that you've thought about probably in terms of practice. So here's what a typical in-season. I actually did a Twitter study, and I had coaches respond back to me on the time they spent in practice per week. And this was kind of a typical week when I took all that data, is that most programs are, and so this is for a Friday game, high school game on a Friday. Most coaches were spending somewhere between 2.5 to 3 hours with film, lifting, conditioning, and a walkthrough. That was kind of the general, and we were in that category too for a long time in our program. Tuesdays, your heavy hitting day, full pads, contact. Some coaches went offense one day, and then they might come back on Wednesday and do defense. Some coaches do both. But most generally, teams are in full pads on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then most of them back off on Thursday, and they go shells or helmet shoulder pads, go through their pregame stuff. And then Friday is obviously game day. A lot of coaches bring their players in on Saturday. Some of them lift. Some of them do what they would call a flush out run. I'm not even really sure what that means. And they would watch film on Saturday morning. A lot of times 7 a.m., 8 a.m., get them up, bring them in. And then Sunday, the coaches would get together, usually between 2 and 6 hours, sometimes as much as 8 and 10 hours to game plan for a total of about 15 to 20 hours a week, just football. And that's not counting any type of game planning at home. That's obviously not counting the game day itself. That's not counting doing the field. That's not counting laundry. That's just time spent with the players or the coaches. And so that's kind of a typical week. And so we've all kind of put this week in because this is the way we've been raised, and probably how we went through our football program is, we believe in things. Vince Lombardi, he said, the harder you work, the harder it is to surrender. You can't cheat the grind. It knows how much you've invested, and it won't give you nothing you haven't worked for. And probably the most famous or infamous one would be, we should practice so hard that the games become easy. Okay. Well, I'm kind of here to flip that whole mentality on its end and say, from a high-performance, sprint-based football culture, we want to make Friday the hardest day of the week. And everything in this schedule that we have builds towards Friday night. I personally don't want to see how much I can get out of them on Tuesday and Wednesday. I want to see how much I can get out of them on Friday. And that's kind of our goal through all of this. So kind of have that in the back of your mind as I'm going through this practice schedule. So here's the reality, and this probably pisses a lot of people off. Rest and recovery are more important than practice. Most of us think practice makes perfect. Perfect practice prevents poor performance. We've heard all these things. And so we're always going to default towards practice. Well, The reality is, if your players are not properly rested and recovered, it really doesn't matter what you're doing in practice, and you're probably doubling down. And then when it comes to game, you're not going to have your best. And so this is a very just kind of basic, archaic graphs to look at. So let's just hypothetically say that on Monday morning, when our players wake up, they have 100 units of energy. That's what they have. So they are as rested as they possibly could be. And so if game day was that Monday, we are at 100%. Okay. As the week goes on, things start robbing that energy, right? We know what we feel like, that Friday at 3:00 feeling, when we're not in season, especially when that last bell rings and they tell us that we can go home, or, if you work a 8 to 5 job outside of school, like you know how excited you are for that Friday and how much of maybe a grind the week has been through all the things that you've done. So I just gave some examples here of what could rob from that 100 unit of energy. School. So obviously, these kids are student athletes. So, on Tuesday they may have had a huge physics test. On Thursday might have been a calculus test. They might be applying for scholarships. So you've got school that's robbing energy daily from them, obviously. The idea of sitting in a desk 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day, sometimes listening to lecture, things like that, robs energy. Work. A lot of our kids work. Some of them may leave practice and they may go work 4 or 5 hours at the local grocery store, so to speak. Or they work on the weekends in order to drive nice cars and have nice phones and things like that. And then social life. Kids stay up on social media. They TikTok, they text, they Snapchat, all of those other things. I don't know all of what it is, but they're always connected. And they've got this social life. They've got boyfriends and girlfriends and all these things that take energy. Then there's practice. So for most of us, we may teach our class, but we're not in charge of all the energy that they lose in school. We're not in charge of the energy that they might expend at work or through their social life. We get this chunk of the pie called practice. And if we take 50% of their energy all week in practice, and we're go, and we're beating on them and getting after them all week, we may only show up to Friday with very little left in the tank. And so I think a key question that you really need to look at is, what do your players actually have left in that energy tank for game day? When you factor all of these things in. And that should play a role in how you're planning practice. Most of us, when we don't play well on a Friday night, we double down in the practice category. We practice longer and we practice harder. And we take even more pieces of this pie away from that Friday night game day. And so I really want you to think of that as we go through this practice plan. Our ultimate goal is we want our players to be as fresh as they can in order to play as fast as they can on Friday night. So we're trying to find what is the least dosage of that pie that I can use on practice and be effective. Not the laziest dose. And I think this is where people really have a hard time. They think less practice means lazy coaches. And the reality is, you could get fired for practicing less. The first time your team loses, they're going to come back and say, if you would have practiced longer and harder, you wouldn't have lost. You are losing because you're not in shape enough in the fourth quarter. And we're going to get into a lot of that as we go along. But you need to be ready for that. But you need to be able to stand up for what's right for your kids. And so we want to find that beneficial dosage before it becomes a detrimental dosage and have adverse effects, just like we would in medicine. And so, and we're the Panthers, that's our mascot. And so I always like to use this slide because we want to keep our guys caged up. If you have young kids and it rains all day outside and they're cooped up, as my grandma used to say, in the house, or caged up, and finally the sun comes out and you let them out. That's what we want our guys to be on Friday. We want to cage them up and really piss them off all week by taking away reps, limiting their opportunities, so that when those opportunities show up on Friday night, they're ready to let it all hang out for you. And we do that by alternating this idea of a high-low CNS days. So we have what we call a sprint day and a non-sprint day. And like I said, I've talked a lot about this over really the last 3 years. So if we take this model from Charlie Francis that he used with track, but can be totally used towards the game of football, Coach Holler calls it a performance day and a fundamental day. Because I think people have trouble with the non-sprint, meaning, what do you mean? We just walk? No, we just don't max velocity burn the CNS day. And so we alternate. For us, a Monday is a sprint day. A Tuesday is a fundamental day where we are doing, we'll get into some of the specifics, but we're not trying to go. And we're actually not even in pads on Tuesday. Wednesday is a sprint day for us because we've had kind of a 24-hour recovery. And then 48. And then Thursday is that non-sprint walkthrough. And then Friday's obviously our big night. And then we're off on Saturday and Sunday. And I'll explain that as we go. So our plan looks like this. 7 hours. Our goal is to always be done in 2 hours. As the season goes on, we cut that down even more. Even in the preseason, even in the traditional two-a-days that we used to all have that we really can't anymore, we try to usually stick around that 2 hour time. We have a few, less than 5 practices that would go longer than that in the entire season. But this is, we want to limit our players' opportunities because we want to find that minimum effective dose possible. So Monday for us looks like this. We do film and game plan install because we had Saturday and Sunday off. We've already done things throughout the weekend, though. We've sent them things digitally to get them prepared for what the game plan is going to look like or to correct mistakes, but we'll have a film session. We'll divide up based upon positions. We will do team RPR and speed drills, and then we will run 3 max velocity sprints. Again, if you are in my athletic PE class, which 95 to 98% of our athletes are, you've already done this, and you will just go home. Our goal is to have everyone out by 4:45. At the latest, 4:30 would be the best. And so then our younger kids who play on Monday nights, they go play their game on Monday nights. Our varsity guys go home, and they recovery. And I'll talk more about record, rank, and publish and what these max velocity sprints are, again, as we go. Tuesday is more of a traditional football practice. It is a fundamental or a non-sprint day for us. The key difference is we're in helmets only. We build in a lot more rest, though, and we never condition. We work on special teams. We work on fundamentals. We create challenging drills for our kids, things that we feel like we're either struggling with or that we have gotten certain aspects down, and we're going to build upon those drills each week. We do outside drill or 7-on-7. I mean, we've done that all summer without pads on. And then we actually go against bags or what we call hand shields on offense and defense. And we focus, obviously, defensively on our opponent's best plays. I know we all say that, but sometimes we'll run 20 defensive plays. We don't. We rarely, with our number ones, go over 5 defensive plays in a practice session. And if we're really good on the first 3, that might be it. And I know that freaks a lot of you guys out. But we teach based upon different reads and things like that. And we teach concepts and ideas, and that's what we do. And we build what the opponents do into those examples so that we can play fast. And so we don't get caught up in formations and motions and all of these things. We have basic rules that we use for most all situations. And then obviously offensively, we're going to focus on our best plays. Then on Wednesday, we are going to put the pads on, but we carry them out to practice, actually. And we're going to start with a sprint period. So we're going to do some individual drills. Maybe we're going to time them. There's a free lap timer. You're going to see me talking about free lap and timing. If you're not timing, you're not sprinting. Coach Holler talks about it. It needs to be timed. It needs to be recorded. It needs to be ranked, and then published. You need, at minimum, you need to yell out the times in practice. Whether the wide receivers are running go routes or you're throwing a bubble to them and they're catching it and seeing who can get to 20 yards the fastest. You're throwing a toss play to your running back and you're seeing who can catch it and run the fastest. You're challenge your kids with a sprint period. And then just like we do throughout the week, we're going to alternate a high, low, intense period during that sprint day. So if you have an inside run, maybe we have 4 or 5 plays of inside run, we're going to follow that up maybe with an alignment formation recognition. And we're going to, we're not going to start practice going, 100 miles an hour like a lot of us do, run everywhere, run between drills, run between water, all those things, and then try to have this long, perfect, plan, when in reality is the game of football is choppy, practice needs to be choppy. We're going to have, again, a short offensive team period and a short defensive team period. Coaches, I think, like the comfort of these long team periods, but the reality is your opportunity for injury goes up. You're burning the steak, or you're burning your players out, you're robbing energy. And the reality for most of us is our scout teams aren't very good anyway. So a lot of times we might even be getting this false sense of security about what we're doing in practice because we're probably not getting the best look. A couple things you can do to maximize your time and also your energy while getting these max velocity reps is you can just run your 6-play script or whatever you script. Maybe you script the first 5, or you can take your best 6 plays. And we're going to run these like a series. We're going to time it, and we're going to do it just like maybe the game is done. If it's an up-tempo thing, we might do it for a few up-tempo plays. We may, if we want to see our best 6 plays run to the best of their ability, we'll even let our players walk back. And you want to talk about really ticking off old school football coaches is have your players walk back. That really gets people because that, most people think walking is a sign of lazy. Well, no, walking is a sign of recovery so that we can come back and run the next play at 100%. These diagrams are from Derek Hansen on this idea of a few up-tempo things that you could do, that if you're big time up-tempo and you started and you wanted to run 10 plays, you can see what happens to your velocity over 10 plays. If you want to maintain that velocity, build in some strategic rest in between or substitute guys so that you can maintain that velocity. Because if you keep that top diagram through 20 offensive plays, by the end of your offensive team period, you're running, your plays are in 3rd gear. And you want them to play in 5th gear on Friday, and you're wondering why you're not playing in 5th gear on Friday, or why you're not fast on Friday, and why your guys look wore out. Well, guess what? Half of your plays throughout the week were all done at a severe sub-maximum speed. Or you could create different situations. So I gave you a few examples, that you might see in a game. Your team's got to score in 6 plays. They got to get the 2-point conversion. They got to get an onside kick and then complete a shot play. And in those situations, you either do that or you don't. So we don't get to go back and redo and run that whole thing over and over again, because then it gives these kids kind of a false sense of, well, if we screw this up, we'll get more. Well, they need to kind of understand the finite nature of a play. When you run a play, that play is over, good or bad, and you have to move on to the next one. And if we don't execute, then we lost that chance. And so sometimes you got to be willing to take those opportunities away. And we'll talk more about like focus and things like that as we go. But if you want a focused group of guys, you limit the opportunities. You can do tons of defensive situations within that sprint day script as well. And then Thursday, we want our players happy, ready to go off that field. So we're going to go helmet and shoulder pads so that we can fit in and see the things that we want to. We don't have a practice schedule. We don't have a time segment. We do things on a rolling schedule. We complete X, we go to Y. We complete Y, we go to Z, and we keep going all the way through. And we get things done. We want them to stay fresh and healthy. We want them to stay hungry. Again, limit the reps. Some weeks I will not let my team defense get a single rep. my number ones on Thursday, which really ticks them off. And then we finish having some fun with some trick plays. And then we try to get them off the practice field ASAP. We're not going to get into that. Run it again on Thursday. And we have. I used to scream and yell and get mad and fire my team defense on Thursday and do all those things. We want this thing to go smooth, and we want them to execute, and we want, like I said, be walking off the field with a smile. So just a couple examples here of what this looks like. I got a couple plays that we ran on Tuesday with just helmets against these hand shields, and then we turned around and ran them on Wednesday in full pads, and then you got to see what they look like in a game on Friday. So here we are installing just a wrinkle to a down play that we have where this wingback's going to come kick out. So we're going against bags, and you can see we have to teach our guys how we're going to hold the bags. Then you can see us going against people, and then this is the first play of our game. And you can see everyone gets their block, and you can see what a healthy, fast, fresh running back looks like. First play of the game. And even though we hit bags on Tuesday, we limited the reps on Wednesday. We made sure our guys know where they're going, what they're doing. And like I said, we keep it simple, and our guys are able to execute. Here's another example in the playoffs. So you can see they're all dressed up a little bit more. It rained on this day. So we're running our buck sweep, which is a big play of ours, through the muck. We're making sure we're getting to our blocks. The very next day it snowed, so here we are against bodies in the snow, running the same play. And then here we are, and I love this, on Saturday playoffs, and I forget how many guys are on the ground. 5. And he barely gets him down at the end. But our guys are tons of energy. Lots of guys down on the ground, and you can see our guys are getting after it. And we can do all of that without destroying them every day of practice. We can make game day the hardest day of the week. So with that, whole idea of sprint-based football is we do 0 mindless conditioning. What is mindless conditioning? Meaning get on the line and we're just going to run. Why? Because we got to be in shape to win the fourth quarter. I used to do this for so long, and I'm glad I started coaching track because it taught me a lot, and I'm glad I got around smart people and this idea of conditioning. So here's some traditional conditioning things. Gassers, 110s, 300-yard shuttles. We used to do something called Steeler miles. We'd run a full lap around the football field. The coaches would stand at each corner and make sure guys didn't cut corners. We'd run 20-40s. We would bear crawl 100. We would sprint 100 yards, backpedal 100 yards, bear crawl 100 yards. Your fastest guys would finish first. Your slow guys would barely finish, and it was just a disaster. And coaches would get pissed because they would say we're not working hard. We doubled down on this idea of conditioning. The reality of it is that's not how the game is played. The game is not played in a conditioning state of mind, right? The game is not played aerobically. All right, it's played in short bursts of 5 to 6 seconds with about 30 seconds recovery. It's explosive movements repeated time and time again. It's not long, slow gassers that take 40 seconds, 50 seconds, where kids are at sub-max. And I think Vince Anderson at TFC Chicago last December said, if you demand explosive movements on running, blocking, tackling in the weight room, why would you turn your back and then run slow conditioning with poor posture? It sends a mixed message and it trains you, right? We all do that. We want them to be fast and physical throughout practice, and then we get to this conditioning period. And the reality is a lot of guys save it throughout practice because they know that once it comes to conditioning, they're going to have to put out the effort. And so they may slack on certain parts of practice so they got enough to just make it through conditioning. Charlie Francis, this was from his idea of velocity, right? We want this high intensity. That's what we want our Friday nights to look like. This is our max velocity sprint work. Then you've got these fundamental things that we do to teach the game of football. And then there in the middle is this traditional conditioning. So again, most of us are good. We are good in the purple category. We're good with fundies, we drills, we know how to teach the game of football. Most of us are very poor at the max velocity part, which I'm going to get into. And most of us are really good at traditional conditioning. We can get our guys tired. The reality is you don't want to be good at traditional conditioning. As Charlie Francis said, it's too slow to be specific, it's too high to recover within 24 hours, and it limits your central nervous system to be able to come back the next day. And if you do this on Monday, you may do it on Saturday after the game. You do it on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you back off on Thursday probably. What do you have left? I ask you again, what do your players have left for Friday? How much energy did you make them spend doing mindless conditioning on those other days of practice? So some problems I have is when you are running a gasser, how do you know your fitness level is improving? How do you know your best players are improving? Is it because they're finishing first? Is it actually challenging them? How do you know your back guys are getting better? Is it because they're actually finishing? Why are we treating kids the same? If I have a lineman in the trenches that has to grapple, let's say, for 5 to 6 seconds, or I've got a skill position player that's got to run repeated routes throughout the game, why are we conditioning them the same way? Why are we lining them up and running gassers? Are either of them actually improving what they need on the field, or are they just trying to get by? They're just trying to make sure, do enough that the coach doesn't yell at them. Do we ever think about what the effect that the rest of practice had before conditioning? The effect of school, this global effect? Because this is not just, conditioning isn't just a separate thing. If we've been go for 2.5 hours and we've ran, your wide receivers may have ran 60 routes. Have you ever really stopped and counted how many reps your players are getting in practice? How many team reps? How many routes they've ran? How many times they've went through the chute? All those things. How's this conditioning going to affect tomorrow's practice? If we beat the hell out of them like we used to on Monday, that sets us up for a pretty bad Tuesday. And if we get pissed on Tuesday and we condition them some more, that's going to set up an even worse Wednesday. And then, again, I ask you, what do you got left on Friday night? And then, is this my best use of practice time? And is this really why we're losing? Really? You got to ask yourself. I always say, why is the losing team always the least conditioned? Why do we always say that? It's an easy default. It's an easy cop-out. Well, if we were in better shape, we'd win the fourth quarter. I think we know that's bullshit. So what can you do instead? Well, coach, we got to do something. Well, how do you fix it? Well, improve your max speed. I'm going to show you a chart. We're going to talk about this idea of speed reserve. Get your guys faster. Improve their ability, sprint capacity, to run fast. Their repeat ability to do something game-specific. Not their ability to do this long, slow, drawn-out 20 minutes of conditioning. Challenge the athletes in practice within the sport. If you've conditioned the hell out of your football guys, why then when basketball starts are they so out of shape? Because football and basketball are different. How do you get in basketball shape? You do basketball stuff. How do you get in football shape? You do football stuff. How do you get in track shape? Well, you sprint, right? Or if you're a distance guy, you do aerobic work and you do sprint work, right? You've got to challenge your athletes within the sport that they're playing and the energy systems that they need to be successful within that particular either position or sport or both. You can auto-regulate. You can say, okay, we're going to do this until we have a 5 to 10% drop-off. So when you figure out that 10-yard fly time, and a 10-yard fly is just, you are measuring the last 10 yards. So the athletes are going to have, we give our athletes an unlimited run-up. usually somewhere between 20 and 30 yards, and then we will just measure that top speed. And they will do those until they see that drop off. Again, repeating that sprint ability. And if they can only do 2 and other guys can do 4, that's really going to piss them off. And you're actually regulating what your guys need, and you actually have an idea of what they need. Not just challenging your 6'3", 270-pound guy to keep running. When athletes have died in the game of football, almost all of them have happened during the conditioning period. Why is that? Because we make everybody do the same type of conditioning. And we really don't have any science behind it. We're just trying to make them work hard and get them tired. You can set a distance. You can say, hey, we're going to give you 10 seconds to run as far as you can. So in track, Coach Corfus has what he calls his 23-second drill. We do the same thing in football. Your best guys might push 90 yards. And you're going to see how far they can make it. And again, you're challenging them in that regard. You can stop and do some intermittent sprints throughout practice. This was a Vince Anderson idea. Do a period of practice and then sneak in some intermittent conditioning in between there. And then what Kier, Coach Wenham Flatt, who's also speaking at TFC, has something called the tribe test. This was his answer to increasing this repeat sprint ability. You start on the goal line. You have 5 seconds to run as far as you can to the 20-yard and back. Okay, so he chose 20 because it wasn't too far that even your worst kids couldn't get to 20, but it was far enough that they couldn't get to the 20 and back. And it made them accelerate, decelerate, and change direction. And then you're going to measure how far they get on the way back. So you and your partner. And then you give them the 25 seconds rest. If you're more of an up-tempo and you think you snap it in 20 seconds, then you could increase that. And so it varies upon your tempo. Your slow guys will, like I said, will cover at least 20, but your fastest guys won't get to 40. You can determine how far you're going to go based upon, what the average drive is generally about 6 plays. Your longest drive might be 12. I would err on the side of less is more. And then I would alternate the different foot touch and pivot in your change of direction. So don't always touch with your right. And then, as Kier would say, your reps might be based on what the head coach thinks. Like, you need to pick your battles. If the head coach wants something that kind of sucks or looks like it sucks, then sometimes that might determine your reps if you're not the head coach. But what do we mean by max velocity sprint work, right? I've been talking about sprinting. I used to think I knew what sprinting was. I thought sprints, wind sprints, whatever the hell that means, were just running at the end of practice. And so my definition of sprinting was simply running. And running is not sprinting. Max velocity is the highest possible sprint speed you can achieve. It's simply a measurement of the distance you cover over a specific time. A car, for example, it's miles per hour. We could do meters per second. But this is the highest. What is the maximum speed that our players can achieve? Most football coaches, we never dabble in this. We think that football is an acceleration sport, and we need to be able to accelerate, and we need to have quickness, and we never get to this max speed because we don't think that our players get to max speed in a game. And some of that is true, but the reality is when you increase max speed, you increase lots of other things. So what Derek Hansen said is the faster your top end speed, the faster your sub-max speed. If I go from running 10 meters a second to 11.8 meters per second max velocity, I have increased my 80% as well. If I could run at 20 miles an hour, but now I can run 22 miles an hour, running 20 in a game is going to be super easy. If my max velocity is 20 miles per hour, I cannot maintain 20 miles per hour in a game. And that's what we call speed reserve. The higher your roof is, the more you'll raise the floor. And so that's what our goal is. We're wanting to increase our players' max velocity so that their sub-max also increases. There's also lots of other global effects on speed. Coach Haller says it's the tide that lifts all boats. Ken Clark, who's also speaking, has done lots of work on how when you increase your max velocity, your acceleration also improves. Coach Korfus would argue that it is the best hamstring strengthening exercise there is. I've seen it in our own weight room that the faster our guys get, the more their weights increase. Strength doesn't always increase speed. I think on the flip side of that, max velocity has a huge effect on strength training. For us, we like to measure the 10-yard fly because of football. So we measure this max velocity speed through miles per hour. And this was something I took from Coach Holler. We have 20-mile-an-hour club, 21-mile-an-hour club, 22, 23. I know coaches that actually bought a radar gun, which I think is a cool idea. Otherwise, you can just take their 10-yard or their 10-meter fly. If you're more of a track guy and you work obviously in meters, you can take this conversion, take 20.45 if you're 10-yard, divided by their 10-yard and get their miles per hour. So it's kind of a neat just incentive. And you've seen where in the NFL, they've really started to look at that miles per hour data. And then we take that and we record it, we rank it, and we publish it. So here's our top list of 40 times. We use a free lap timer. We set it up the same way every time. We allow our guys to spike up. We're either on the track or we have a rubber runway for our hallways. And we're always going to measure. We're going to run probably 3, usually no more than 3. Sometimes I'll allow them to run a 4 if they're feeling good and they want to. And we are going to take the average of their top 2. So not just their one individually. And if they have a time that's kind of an outlier, we'll either throw that time out or we'll make them certify it by running again. And you can see the difference in previous years for most of them to this year and then what their best is. And we track all this progression. So over time, this is what we see. This is one of our seniors, Brody Waddell. He is a skill position player. Here in Illinois, we haven't played football. I will be devastated if we can't, because a kid like him who has worked his butt off that came to us as a 5.99 40. The slowest skill position kid in his class is now the fastest or the second fastest skill position player in his class. And his current PR is a 4.61 that he ran 2 weeks ago. And you can see this hasn't been a perfect, just linear decline. There's been ups and downs based upon the sport he was playing, how he felt, whether we were in more of a strength phase at a certain time. But over, 3 years, he's went from a 5.99 40 down to a 4.61. Even more impressive, though, is what it does for our linemen. So when you think about conditioning, the linemen are always last. When we're running 40s and we're running fly 10s and things like that, we are competing and record, rank, and publish, but we're not racing. So kids are competing against themselves, and they're competing against a position amongst the lineman group. They're competing against an all-time list. How do I compare to someone that came before me? As we have freshmen that come in, if I go back here, we have freshmen that come in and run a 5.75, and they think they're super slow because they see these guys running 4.60. I can say, hey, you see that guy right there? He ran 5.99. You are already faster than he was. I think that is so powerful to have that historical data to be able to share with our athletes in where certain kids have came from. So if we get back to linemen, we can see this progression. This kid, Dylan Dickwood, he's going to be a junior. He's going to be very important to our success this year. He ran a 7.71 in August. The first part of the school year of his freshman year. And you can see how this has progressed. And you can see that kind of break in the training between where we were in January and then COVID hits, obviously. And we got to train for a couple weeks in the summer. But when we got back rolling again in August, and he just set his PR last week, actually on Monday of this week, with a 5.39. And every day he pushes it because he wants to continue to improve. This is the kid that ran 7.71. If we were doing slow conditioning and running gassers and 110s, he'd probably still be in the mid-6s in his 40 time. And like we said, this type of speed and this idea of max speed is what's going to raise all boats, as Coach Holler talks about. So here's what it looks like from a team perspective. And I always say 2018 was when we stopped only testing speed and we started training. We used to just test beginning and end and hope that what we were doing got us faster. Now we record, rank, and publish. We create competition, and we've seen these numbers. And what you have to understand is every year seniors graduate. So we may, I think last year we had 10 seniors out of that 23. They graduate, and our numbers continued to increase. Now, will it always continue to go up? I don't know. We are way ahead of where we've ever been, I guess is what I'll say. So then what do you do on the weekends? You saw that I said off, our weekends are off. What does that mean, right? We got to get prepared. We can't be lazy. Well, number one, let your kids sleep in and recover over the weekend. Recovery is more important. What does your pie look like? What does your pie look like on Monday when you get them again? If you brought them in and you conditioned them, you lifted them, you woke them up, and if your only reason for waking them up is so they don't go out and drink beer and things like that, then you've got lots of other issues. Let them sleep in. Let them be kids. Let them watch College Game Day. Let them recover so that they're ready to go. Remember, Friday is the biggest night of the week, not Saturday morning. And the way we do it is we use Huddle. So valuable, we share messages, we create game plans, and we send them to the players, and they have a chance to look at that stuff over the weekend. And we explain to them the importance of that, and then we expect them to know the basic things. We don't have long, detailed game plans again. We don't want that sophisticated complexity. But our kids know, what they're going to go against across from them, what their best plays are, things of that nature, and we give them an idea of what our game plan is when we get into film on Monday. As a coaching staff, we also do not meet on the weekends, which I know is crazy. Technology is there. Let's use it. I mean, I think if COVID-19 has shown us anything, is that we can adapt to not meeting in person. We've been doing that as a coaching staff now for, probably 4 to 5 years now. We use Huddle Assist. We pay for that so we don't have to enter in all that mindless data. We use Google Drive to store all of our information. We text. It allows our coaches to work at the time that best suits them. We allow them to, what we say, build their own house, which comes from chop wood, carry water. The coaches have some autonomy over, what they want to do, when it works best for them, morning person, night person, and then they understand the expectations. We've been together for a long time, so I don't have to create specific expectation sheets for my coaches. They know what's expected of them because we've been doing this for a long time. Tired coaches make poor coaches, in my opinion, and family is way more important. And my staff, we have a lot of young children, and we want to take that time, especially in a long football season, to spend time with our family and recharge. So just like the kids, when we come back on Monday, we're ready to go. And this is just an example of what our Google Drive stuff looks like. And our coaches have access. They edit our practice plans. They edit the game plan. And we have this at our leisure all weekend long and really all week long. So what is this about substitution? Most of us sub, but most of us have a hard time subbing because we have our best. I mean, I've heard this all the time. We just don't have any depth, coach. I'd love to sub. We just don't have any depth. Well, here's what happens in the game of football. There's going to come a time where you're going to need depth. And if you wait until an injury, like the Cowboys, and I know they've had lots of other issues, but you got to have depth. And you're not going to have depth unless you actively build it. Okay, and so this came from Brett Bartholomew, who wrote Conscientious Coaching. And I know it's long quotes, but I think it's very important that we understand this concept. Players 6 through 30. Every football team has a small handful of really good players each year, guys who are difference makers. In any given year, you can label 1 to 5 guys as your top players, says Bartholomew. Every team also possesses a small number of players that you don't really want to put on the field for any extended length of time, for whatever reason, be it inexperience, lack of physical ability, poor work habits, etc. Where your football team really develops its core culture and true identity are among the players who you'd rank 6 through 30 on your roster. Those athletes are the true role models on your team, and those are the guys who can step in when injuries occur. Plus, if you can develop players 6 through 30 on your roster, you'll also find that you never need to come up with in-game strategies to hide weaker players or lesser skilled players. It's absolutely critical that coaches develop a concentrated improvement plan for those 20 to 25 players you'd rank 6 through 30. Improving players 6 through 30 can transform a mediocre football team into a good football team and a good football team into a great team. You got to make it a priority. So don't just tell me that you don't have depth. Nobody does. I was just reading an article about Clemson and how, from an offensive line perspective, they have little depth. So this is Clemson. They're blaming their lack of offensive line depth on the reason that they lost to Notre Dame, because in the fourth quarter, they did not have the offensive line depth that they normally do. You got to build it, and you got to work with what you have. Football is a long season. You need to keep these guys fresh and be ready for the potential of injuries. Injuries get you beat. You got to go through your roster. You got to figure out what each kid can do. And then you got to give them those opportunities. You got to create formations. I know Brett talked about not hiding them sometimes based upon how small your roster is, because we don't get to recruit at the high school level. You sometimes need to hide some of those players until you can get them to the level that you can. But most importantly, though, you've got to put them in situations where they can be successful, because everyone can do something. And it might be that they can fake, whatever that scenario is. But when you actively think about it, you are going to try to find as many one-way starters as you can, because that is what's going to really force you to make this a priority. And that's what our goal is. We want to try to find as many guys playing one way as we can. It keeps these players invested. It helps you reload every year, because you're trying to play as many guys as you possibly can. You can put it on the call sheet. This was last year when we had some young guys at wingback. We had specific things that we wanted to run, or we didn't want to run, obviously, when we had certain subs in the game. And so we made that a part of our call sheet. And then part of that idea is sharing the wealth. So this is, we're a wing T system. So these are our last two major wingbacks that we've had. And you can see their yards per carry and how limited their carries have been per game over the last couple of years. So we're not going to have that running back that gets 30 yards a carry. And those the Williams kid and the Ross Miller kid have been all state. And like I said, injuries can happen. You got to have guys that are ready to go, and we want to try to rotate as many guys through as we possibly can. And then my last few things are some ambiguous terms that we use. One of those being this idea of toughness. It kind of goes along with that Iron Man, we're going to play the best 11. We got to be tough. And anytime you lose, we always default to this idea of toughness. All right, so I'm going to show you a couple videos here from Nebraska on toughness.
Men, ultimately, not as a football team, not just as a football team, in life, you will end up achieving whatever standard you set for yourself. Not just as a football player, as a man. We got push-ups! Push-ups! 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 2. You will end up achieving the standard that you set for yourself, and that you allow for your teammates. Who you are some of the time is who you are all the time. Allow guys to cut corner in the weight room this summer during conditioning. That's who you are at camp. That's who you be on Saturday afternoon.
So what a spare you watching the whole thing, but what a great recruiting video. Looks like obviously hard work, Navy SEALs, training, some of the toughest people, obviously, if not the toughest people in the world. But where I think as coaches, where we fail in terms of football is we think of toughness as this overarching term, and that, we take our team, we get them up in the middle of the night, we take them and work with the Navy SEALs and do all of those things. Is how does that really carry over to the game of football? And I think we so much want this idea that the more we grind them, the more we give them, the more we do, the more we push them, the more they're going to execute on the game, on the field. And the reality is there's this huge disconnect between what's actually helping you win or causing you to lose versus this idea of toughness. And while that's a great recruiting video, and it could be a team bonding event or things like that, I'm not sure, and I have a hard time, and I like Scott Frost, and I'm not calling him out, but I'm wanting you to think about that from a different perspective, because that was what they did. And then here's their overall record, over the last 3 years. And I understand they're building a program. You've got to take a look at what you're doing. And if everything's about toughening players up, is it really determining whether you're winning and losing? And here's another video.
I don't want guys that go out in Minnesota with hoodies on and everything for warm-ups. That just says to me that just okay is enough. I'm a little cold, so I'm going to come out here like that. You'd got ridiculed or beat up when I was playing if you did that.
And so this is coming from a guy that's in a hoodie, worrying about what the players are wearing in their pregame and determining whether they're tough enough based upon wearing a hoodie in pregame. I mean, is that what's determining what's getting them to execute in the fourth quarter? Again, I fail to see the correlation. So I really want you to think about, what does toughness mean to you? Because toughness is not really, when it comes to football, it's not about becoming a Navy SEAL. Eric Corum says that one of the critical issues we need to address is the misconception of mental toughness. Mental toughness is task-specific capability, whereas you become greater than the problem you are facing. Vince Anderson said being tough has to do with precision and not suffering. Doing a task-specific job when it's the time to do it, connected to the sport that you're playing. Bert Hester, who I've gotten to know, says if you have built a culture of service and trust in your program, you will still have roughly 2% of your athletes who will fail reps. You can run them into the ground with punishment reps or make the team run their punishment reps. It will not matter to these mentally weak. I'll let you fill in the blank on what word he used. They are selfish and soft. When they make the choice to become tougher, they will become tougher. 1% of the 2% will mature and make the choices to become tough. The other 1% will weed themselves off. And so again, doing these conditioning, these military-style workouts to toughen our team, I think we're losing that connection to football, and we're probably wasting a lot of time on things that aren't helping us get better. How do you fix it? Well, I think personally that love and trust are the most important. You want kids to sell out for you, they got to know you love them, and they got to be able to trust you. Are you living up to your word? Do you care about them, or do you just care when they execute? You serve from the top down. You show them what it means to serve. So you're not the entitled coaching staff that makes everyone do everything for them. You don't have seniors that are entitled over freshmen and things like that. And then you put your players in task-specific situations where they must perform. You correct those specific mistakes. And if you claim that your guys aren't tough, in my opinion, it's a bullshit cop-out. Put them in a situation. And in my opinion, and Kurt talked about it, almost all of your guys want to be successful. So there is a reason why they are not performing. It's not a lack of toughness. It might be a lack of skill. It might be a lack of knowledge. There might be a lack of experience. But it's not because they don't want to perform. And if you do have those guys that don't want to perform, then those are the guys you want to replace. And then the final thing, and this kind of goes along with this idea of toughness, punitive physical punishment. something that's been around the game of football, up, downs, sprints, all of these things that we do to get our guys to do what we want them to do. And I know people say, but. Well, what if my team's jumping off sides? What if we have 10 holding penalties on game day? What if they're getting in trouble in school? I get all these questions all the time when coaches ask me, well, how do you deal with this stuff? Well, here's the simple answer, and it's not really simple. Starts with relationships. You got to build relationships. They got to not want to let you down. You've got to set a standard of performance. You got to explain to them your expectations. You've got to create task-specific opportunities for them to succeed. And then you got to make your program so damn good that no one wants to screw up. But when they do, because kids are going to screw up, they all screw up, get their side of the story, especially if it's something that happened in school, because you never know. I've been quick to hammer a kid for something, and then I figure out what actually happened. So get their side of the story. Replace them as necessary. If they're not doing what they're supposed to do, send them home. You want to talk about getting a kid to understand, don't make them do 50 up downs. That's not what's going to change them. When you send them home and they know you're disappointed, that'll change them. And then if none of that works, then unfortunately sometimes you got to remove them. I want to give you a story about this kid in this picture. So this was our starting right guard on our state runner-up team. And this is me after the game was out of hand and we were subbing out our seniors. And this is me hugging him. He sent me a real long message after this. His junior year, I had to kick him off the team. I had given him lots of chances to do what we've asked him to do, gave him multiple opportunities, talked to him. We replaced him, and it just wasn't getting through. And we were in the second round of the playoffs, and he made another mistake after I had told him, kind of given him that ultimatum that we needed him to get on board. And we had to remove him. And it was devastating for him. And it really, really meant something to him when that opportunity was taken away. And he sat down and he met with me that following spring. And we laid out a plan of attack to get him back. And he worked his butt off so hard that he eventually started right guard in the state championship game for us. The only Central athlete to ever start at right guard in a state championship game in the history of our school. So it's a pretty cool story. But sometimes kids have to learn. And no amount of up downs or sprints was going to change some of the things that were going on. And he needed to know that I cared about him, first of all. And we had a relationship. And I told him I didn't want to do it. But he understood that I had to live up to my word of what I had told him. And that he wasn't living up to his word. But at the end of the day, he became better. And I don't think he'll ever forget that. So I want to leave you with this. These are what I kind of consider the 10 commandments. And most of this stuff is what I've went over today. And so if you want more information on even more details about this idea of sprint-based football, I'm going to give you my contact information on the next slide. But I think number 10 kind of sums everything up. Happy and healthy athletes will love football. And that's what we're after. And so we have gone away from that old school my way or the highway mentality, and we're trying to meet athletes where they're at. We're focused on high performance and building relationships and that culture that kids want to be a part of our program. I thank you for sticking this out and listening. And again, if you have questions or if I can help you in any way, there's my contact information. And I would be more than happy to help you. And I appreciate the TFC community and all of you for taking the time to listen to a high school coach like myself. So thank you, and I hope you've enjoyed it.